Beyond victory. A momentous problem faces us today. That problem is the re-educating of Germany to become again a decent member of the community of nations. How can we solve the problem of German youth, trained in blind obedience rather than in individualistic thinking? What of the German woman? How can we lift them out of the realm of Nazi doctrine into a field of decent family life and sane public service? How can the press and radio play an intelligent role in the salvaging of Germany? To discuss this important subject, we have in the studio with us Miss Lisa Sergio. Miss Sergio is a well-known news analyst and commentator on WQXR New York, and it is also heard on the Blue Network interpreting the news. Miss Sergio is an outstanding lecturer on world affairs and is particularly interested in addressing young groups. Discussing the problem with Miss Sergio is Dr. Pennington Hale of our foundation staff. Dr. Hale was formerly Assistant Director of the Commission to Study the Organization of Peace and the United Nations Association. He is a graduate and former instructor at Dartmouth College. During 1942, he traveled under the auspices of the United States War Department as a lecturer on the orientation courses at Army posts. Dr. Hale is a popular figure in the American lecture platform and known to many listeners familiar with our Beyond Victory program. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Hale.
Miss Sergio, from what different angles do you think we should approach the problem of Germany with which we are now confronted?
Dr. Hale, I think the German problem has at least three major different angles: military, economic, and educational.
Educational. That's the angle I should like to develop with you, Miss Sergio. If we're going to re-educate the Germans, we must ask, first, I should think, what has been wrong with their own system of education?
Yes, and in answering that question, I think we would find that much is wrong with their basic system of education. Plus, of course, all that the Nazis did to make it even worse. Well, take, for instance, the burning of the books by the Nazis, one of their first measures to kill freedom and individualism of thought.
We had a Beyond Victory program on that very topic recently, Miss Sergio. However, as you say, the problem does go deeper than these particular manifestations, don't you think?
Oh, yes, it does. It is as deep as the roots of pan-Germanism, as far-reaching as the conviction that the Germans are destined to be the master race of the world, and therefore should rule it.
Yes.
It goes into the entire concept of family life, as well as the school, recreation, occupations, professions.
And would you say, Miss Sergio, that there is any one particular characteristic which was outstanding in the German system?
Well, Dr. Hale, of course, I don't think one can ever oversimplify such a problem. Yet, the one characteristic which, to my mind, stands out in every phase of German education is obedience. Where self-reliance is the aim of democratic education, blind obedience and discipline seem to be the aim of fascist education wherever it's been established. And, of course, they have always guided German education, even before Nazism.
Yes, I feel myself that that's very true. And what do you think the result of that has been?
It can only be either weakness or undue assertiveness. It produces either a weakling or a bully. And under Nazism, both bullies and weaklings have been given a place in their whole social and political system. Mostly, however, I think the Nazis have developed bullies, don't you think?
Yes, indeed I do. And we've seen recently what has been happening to some of those bullies, too, after they've been captured. How would you account, however, for the subservience of the Germans to their Nazi chiefs? At least the subservience on the part of the bullies to those above them.
Well, I think that they obey any chief who would order them to act for the greater glory and power of Germany.
Yes.
I think bullies and weaklings have in common that worship for the idea, of the master race. As a matter of fact, in the horror camps, however, lately, the Nazis did destroy thousands and thousands of Germans whom they considered to be weaklings. So today, what remains in Germany, particularly among the younger generation, I'm afraid, is going to be mostly strong-headed bullies.
Yes, I hadn't fully realized how true that is. They themselves have weeded out from among themselves many of the weaker, as they would call them, members of their society.
Precisely.
They weeded out those who would be easier to deal with than those who are left.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings to my mind the question that I'd like to ask you now. as to whether you believe that merely changing the organized school system of Germany can alter the dangerous trait, the tendency toward becoming bullies.
No, I doubt it, frankly, Dr. Hale. I think that several factors outside the school, the organized school, contribute to the formation of an individual and, consequently, of a people's character. We mentioned the family before in passing. But in the family, the woman plays a tremendous role.
Yes, I know that's true generally, but I wonder if it's true even in Germany. Well, that reminds me, recently, a friend of mine, a woman I know, called my attention to an article in a magazine called, I believe, The Independent Woman. An article by Dr. Lawrence Kuby, who has been a special consultant with the Army Air Surgeon. Dr. Kuby discusses the problem of re-education in Germany in that article, and as I remember it, he brings out his belief that in Germany the woman is so subservient to her husband, has no equality with her husband, is generally considered inferior. And he believes that the constant enforcement of the father's authority in the family develops a sense of what he calls insecurity in the children.
I'd say that that was true, but I don't know whether Dr. Kuby meant that this subservience, let us say, of the woman was typical of Germany, because it really isn't. I think it is something that is a tradition throughout Europe. The man is the head of the family.
Yes.
And, the woman obeys him. Now, the average European woman, at least before the war, what may happen from now on we don't know, did not aspire to be independent financially or otherwise as much as the woman in America or in Britain wants that sense of independence. But in regard to the woman of Germany, of course, aside from independence or subservience, there is one other very important point which I really would like to make.
What's that, Miss Sergio?
It's this. In Germany, and this applies also to Italy in its formation of fascism, women turned out to be early and strong supporters of their respective dictators. I would say that they had a tremendous amount to do with bringing the men of those countries over to their point of view. I don't believe this fact is generally stressed enough. Do you?
Well, I hadn't myself realized it fully. I know that, thinking, as I have, that in European countries, and especially in fascist countries, women had little to do with shaping public opinion. I perhaps hadn't realized how much they can do in that line indirectly.
You see, Dr. Hale, there is one thing to be said about both these dictators, Hitler and Mussolini. They looked into some psychological and historical realities before they set out to create their system.
Indeed they did, and very cleverly.
Well, one great reality is that the woman, as the member of the family that has the care of the children, the feeding of them, and so forth, is really the spirit behind any revolution. The man is the tool that carries it out. He'll go in the street and fight a revolution.
Yes.
But it is generally because he knows that his woman at home hasn't enough to feed her children with.
Ah, yes.
You see, it's the
Yes.
sense of wanting to give security to your family. They think they're underpaid. They think they're living under tyrants, whatever may be one of many reasons that have caused revolutions in the world.
Yes.
But it's generally because the woman has brought the man a sort of focus on this problem, that she hasn't enough to
Yes.
give to the children.
And the woman is preoccupied with the question of security always. Isn't
Definitely.
she?
And Mussolini and Hitler, both in their own way, went out to create laws and establish systems that gave to the women of their countries a sense of security for the children.
Yes.
They improved the educational system. From the outside, it seemed an improvement. They built better schools, established bus services to take children to schools. Women fell for that sort of thing. They give free lunches. They had a wonderful free medical service for children.
Yes.
The women felt that their whole task of educating the children was aided by these men. In later years, the Italian women came to realize that the dictator had only brought up a better stock of Italian children to make better gun fodder.
And of course it sometimes was hard. In fact, for them it was impossible to see the point at which those reforms, those things which in themselves did make for strength and comfort and security, became dangerous.
They couldn't see it partly because they had no adequate political education. Where the woman has no vote, she has no political education.
No, and she can't have.
And
of course.
therefore, I think that the re-education of the German woman is a very important problem.
But do you think that we will find the German women cooperative? Can we work on them? Can we get their cooperation in such endeavor? Do you think that?
I believe so. It has to be a very carefully planned program. We have to begin by giving them a sense of security for their children.
Yes.
If we gave them less by way of medical and other attention for their children than the Nazi state has given them,
Yes.
it would be dangerous. We must give it to them in a democratic way.
Yes, and it will be a problem because women have been as difficult to deal with, I think, recently in Germany as men, haven't they?
I should say so. They've shown themselves able to be just as hard-boiled as the men, and in concentration camps, even more cruel, perhaps, on occasion.
Well, what do you think the explanation for that is?
Well, I think that one of several reasons is that women who have fought, for example, for the partisans for freedom, have wanted to atone in a way for their original acceptance of fascism. In Germany, it was an acceptance of the power that they were given by the Nazis when they were placed in charge of concentration camps.
I think that's intensely interesting and very valuable, those suggestions about the cooperation of women. Now I want to ask you, Miss Sergio, what other factors outside of the school and outside of the home do you think go into the making of the re-educational picture in Germany?
Well, in our time, I'm very sure that the press and the radio, incidentally, are extremely important.
That's undoubtedly true. Just in what way do you mean that the press, for instance, is important?
You see, in Germany, there is a very high degree of general education. Very young people read the newspapers. Maybe they read them theoretically because they like a comic strip if they have them. But in picking up a comic strip and going right straight through even totally unpolitical items, you pick up in the press a certain trend of nationalism.
Yes, and also in Europe, the children have been politically minded because, as you say, they have, in Germany especially, they've picked up the papers and read everything in them at a very early age.
Yes, I think one fact that is to be borne in mind briefly is this, that during the Weimar Republic, the greatest pillar of that republic was the Social Democratic Party, which had 165 newspapers, politically minded. Only 1/5 of their voters read the political newspapers, but all of the rest of Germany got its nationalistic education from the non-political press.
So we've got to work on the non-political press in the future in Germany, haven't we? We've got to see that the slant of non-political items of information is such that will fit into any program of re-education and redirection of the thinking of Germany.
That will build towards self-reliance,
yes,
the value of the individual, and a democratic sense of equality, rather than the superior attitude of the master race.
And that's absolutely essential. And the radio can play its part in that certainly too, can't it?
Oh, yes, in exactly the same terms.
Yes. I think that that duty, that task, that challenge of recreating the validity for the German of the ideals of democratic system, particularly the idea of the importance of the individual, is perhaps the guiding star, the point of reference in our program, don't you?
I agree with you, and it must be created in the school, in the family, and through the public service.
We thank you, Miss Sergio and Dr. Hale, on behalf of the Worldwide Broadcasting Foundation and the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Your talk has thrown much light on the subject of re-educating Germany. These post-war problems concern you, your children, ladies and gentlemen, and your children's children. We cannot shrink from this responsibility. What do you think are the chances of re-educating Germany to become again a decent member of the community of nations? What do you think should be done? Do you agree with the points raised in this program? Your comments and opinions and ideas are important in planning the future of the world's peace. The Carnegie Endowment for International Peace cooperates with the Worldwide Broadcasting Foundation in presenting these Beyond Victory talks. You will want a copy of this important program, which is available at the price of 10 cents to cover the costs involved. Write to us at the Worldwide Broadcasting Foundation at 598 Madison Avenue, New York 22, New York. I'll repeat that address. 598 Madison Avenue, New York 22, New York. Are you looking beyond victory? Then listen in again next week when Beyond Victory will present another program in which the vital problems of the post-war world will be discussed.